welcome to the first, well, actually second, of a series about a very fun topic that I enjoy nerding out about every time I talk about it: comic book panels. What they are, how to understand their composition, and how to effectively use them to communicate in your own comic book, manga, or webcomic. Now, of course, comic books and comic book panels are a massive topic that I'll be breaking down to several videos that you can find when they come out in this playlist that should pop out in the cards up in the right side of, there we go. I just learned how to do that. Anyway, today's topic that I'll be covering is comic book panel basics and flow. As always, I'll be working on my own comic, the Wytchborne, in the background so that you're not staring into the void while I ramble. But anyway, time is short and there's a lot to talk about. So here are 3 principles of comic paneling that you can observe and maybe use in your own comic book projects. Okay, this may be basic for some of you, but it's still important to mention, even if you're already familiar with Z-pattern reading flow. Now, for those of you who are Googling what Z-pattern reading flow is, allow me to introduce to you how everyone reads anything ever. The Z-pattern is a reading principle that is used in advertisement, logo designs, and most importantly, comic books. The principle is based on the idea that most Western readers scan a page from top to bottom, left to right, like how they read a book. In countries like America and the UK, we all start at the upper left-hand corner of just about anything and read across until there's no more text or designs or pretty pictures to look at. Now, of course, in countries like Japan, where they read right to left, you can see that they design things differently in a right to left format. This is also called an S pattern for them. It's basically the same, but just right to left instead of left to right for us. It's just reversed. And that's why every manga you pick up in the States has a warning. You are reading this in the wrong direction. Read this way, you moron! So that dumb people like me don't start from the back of the book. So how do we use this principle in comics? Well, you can see here that in a page that I'm inking that I formatted this page with my character Eleanor on the left side of the page so that she's the first thing the readers see. Not just because she's the largest character on the page, although that is another design principle. I know that instinctually the human brain's tendency once it identifies another human is to look for their eyes. That's why creatures like the xenomorphs are so freaking terrifying. And so having Eleanor's head so close to the left corner where people will start reading anyway, it'll be easy for them to read the next 2 panels that are also next to her body. It's important to me for the readers to be able to jump from looking at her and the other panels. When you're planning out the page, just make sure to think through things like this. Sketch out how you want the reader's eye to flow from panel to make sure that they won't get lost. And by the way, this principle is exactly the same in manga. You can see the same principles in this page, just in reverse. The main idea is to use elements of your drawings or panel layout to help you guide your readers in the direction that they need to read the story. So whether you're starting from the top left or the top right of your page, the principle remains. You want to make sure that the reader's eyes can naturally flow down through your page. I know I say rules are made to be broken in design, but this is one of those rules that I would suggest breaking very, very rarely, if ever. You really don't want to confuse your readers and have them second guessing, is this the panel I should read or this one? So keep the Z pattern or S pattern in mind as you work on your comics or manga. If you're working on a webcomic, well, that's actually a little bit different, as it's usually formatted for scrolling 1 or 2 panels at a time on a phone screen. But you still want to make sure to not suddenly throw off your readers by placing dialogue or important scene elements or things where your readers will either not notice them or get confused as why they're there. So this ties into the previous point a little bit, but when it comes to panels, they're kind of all like dominoes. You can't really talk about one thing without the other, especially when talking about panel flow. Knowing what format your sequential art will be in is important, so important. Seriously. I'm serious, guys. Do not start your project without knowing how it's going to be formatted. Okay, got it? Okay. If your project is going to be a webcomic, then don't format it where it's difficult to read on the phone, like I did. If you're making a manga, don't suddenly just have something coming off from the left side of the page where your readers aren't looking for it. These formats are the way that they are for a reason. Don't just jump in without knowing why, or you may accidentally spend a ton of time on a comic that is basically unreadable, like I did. Okay, I may still be working through some trauma from my first comic experience, but really, warning and horror stories aside, if you understand the format and the medium that you are presenting your comic in, then you can effectively communicate to your viewers, and even use a few tried and true tricks to enhance your panel composition. For example, in this page, we have a character descending from a flight over New York City. It couldn't be any other city because this is a Marvel comic. We can see that as soon as we flip the page, we see the huge scene of New York City and our main character at the top left of the page. We can then follow her as she descends down the page on the right, while the perspective of the artwork in the city also descends, doubling down on that feeling of dropping down to street level. Also note that the building on the panel to the right is just one panel, with the character drawn just 3 times to show her descent. This is a good way of showing that her landing is happening very quickly, rather than if the panel with the building was broken down into 3 separate panels. The artist here is using a ton of different tricks here to show us the story, but none of this would work if they didn't understand how Western comics work, or if they didn't decide how their formatting was going to be before they started working. Another example of comic book tricks is the page turn reveal trick. This one's been used in every comic since the beginning of time. It's a technique used to create suspense, surprise, or excitement by strategically pacing a tease or build-up at the bottom of one page, compelling the reader to turn the page and see the full reveal or resolution. This is a key storytelling tool in comics, as the physical act of turning the page can heighten the anticipation and make the reveal more impactful. Writers and artists often use this to reveal a shocking twist, introduce a new character, or showcase a dramatic or visually stunning moment. So you can imagine that if you want to use this trick, it's really important to know what pages are facing each other and what pages aren't. Make sure you think of this before you start working on your page layout. As you work, remind yourself, okay, page 2 is going to be right next to page 3. So we can tease something big is going to happen at the bottom of page 3 as they flip to page 4 and 5. If we're making a manga, all we have to do is swap the format so that you're turning left to right. For webcomics, your viewers are scrolling up and down, so make your teases and anticipations happen vertically if you can, to make sure that your readers keep scrolling. I want to keep going on and on about how to lay out your comic book pages, but I think I'll save that topic for another video. Make sure to look for visual tricks and methods like this that artists use in their comic formatting to make their stories more immersive. Alright, let's talk about pacing in the flow of your comic. Think of your comic like a movie. Each panel is a frame, and the size of that frame tells your readers how much time or importance they should give it. For example, a large panel or a splash page says, "Hey, this moment is epic, dramatic, or super important. Pay attention." Meanwhile, a series of smaller panels can create a sense of urgency, action, or quick progression through time. Now, at the same time, you don't want to overcrowd your page or have too many details to look at to distract your readers. Watch the other video I made on that. There's a cart. I don't know how to do that. But these are the general rules of thumb. The bigger the size of the panel, the more significant it is. That's why when you introduce a character or show a really powerful attack or significant moment, you use big panels or even full page spreads to show off that moment, whereas smaller panels can show minuscule details that will pay off in the story later or hint at things that are minor to the story, like a character dropping their keys off or hanging up their coat. Or maybe you want to show really quick things, like the character glancing over at someone that they like, or a sudden shift in their expression. Just because these things might be in smaller panels doesn't mean they're less important. These panels will still be impactful, just make sure that the composition makes sense. You're not typically going to show just a character's eyes or their expression change in a full page spread, but you also don't want your new character to be introduced in a thumbnail-sized panel either. All of these factors affect how fast or slow movement will be in your comic. The rhythm of your comic is important to consider when planning out the size of your panels. Slower moments benefit from larger, more spaced out panels, while high energy scenes thrive on smaller, tightly packed ones. Don't just rush your reader through important dialogue scenes, but also don't let them get bored from very, very slow moments either. So when you're planning out your page, think about the tempo of your story. Are we taking a leisurely stroll through the woods, or are we sprinting to escape a demon horde? Let your panel size and layout reflect the pace and emotion of your scene. Okay, so like I said, I could go on forever about this stuff, but I'm going to say that these 3 tips are enough for this video. Hopefully they are helpful as you make your own comic book project. As always, I highly recommend reading as many comics, graphic novels, or manga so you can see how the pros do it and learn from their techniques and get inspired to do your own thing. Anyway, if you have any questions or suggestions for videos for this series of how-to comics, post it down in the comments while you're here, and maybe like and subscribe because that's a nice thing to do and it helps me make more stuff like this. Thanks so much for watching. Now go make something awesome.